An essay concerning human understanding. John Locke's revolutionary theory of knowledge. Introduction. The birth of modern epistemology. When John Locke published an essay concerning human understanding in 1689, he fundamentally transformed how we think about thinking itself. This monumental work emerged during a period of intense intellectual ferment. The scientific revolution was reshaping our understanding of the natural world, and philosophers were beginning to ask profound questions about the nature and limits of human knowledge. Locke, an English physician and philosopher, spent nearly 20 years developing this work, which would become one of the foundational texts of empiricism and modern philosophy. The essay represents Locke's attempt to conduct what we might call an intellectual housecleaning. Before philosophers could make grand claims about God, morality, or the nature of reality, Locke argued, they first needed to understand the capabilities and limitations of the human mind itself. It's as if Locke decided to examine the instrument before trusting its measurements. His central question was deceptively simple but profoundly important. Where does human knowledge come from? And what can we actually know with certainty? The blank slate, rejecting innate ideas. Locke begins his essay by taking direct aim at one of the most cherished philosophical assumptions of his time, the doctrine of innate ideas. Many philosophers, particularly those following in the rationalist tradition, believe that humans were born with certain ideas already imprinted on their minds. These supposedly included concepts like God, mathematical truths, and moral principles that existed in our minds from birth, prior to any experience. Locke systematically dismantles this position through a series of compelling arguments. He points out that if certain ideas were truly innate, meaning present in all human minds from birth, then we should find universal agreement on them. Yet, when we look at different cultures and societies, we find remarkable diversity in beliefs about God, morality, and even basic logical principles. Children and individuals with cognitive disabilities don't seem to possess these supposedly universal truths, which suggests they aren't hardwired into human consciousness. Instead, Locke proposes his famous metaphor of the mind as a white paper, void of all characters. At birth, our minds are like blank tablets, what philosophers later termed tabula rasa. This might seem obvious to modern readers, but in Locke's time, it was a radical and controversial claim. All our ideas, Locke insists, come from experience. There's nothing in the mind that wasn't first in the senses. This single insight would reshape philosophy, psychology, and education for centuries to come. The origin of ideas, sensation and reflection. Having cleared away the concept of innate ideas, Locke turns to the constructive part of his project, explaining where our ideas actually come from. He identifies two fundamental sources of all human knowledge: sensation and reflection. Sensation is the more straightforward of the two. Through our five senses, we receive information about the external world. We see colors, hear sounds, taste flavors, smell scents, and feel textures. These sensory experiences provide our minds with what Locke calls simple ideas, basic, irreducible elements of thought like red, sweet, loud, or smooth. We don't create these simple ideas through any mental effort. They simply arrive in our consciousness through our encounters with the world. Reflection, the second source, is more subtle. This is the mind's ability to observe its own operations. When we think, doubt, believe, reason, or will something, we can become aware of these mental activities themselves. Reflection provides us with ideas about mental processes, concepts like thinking, doubting, willing, and knowing. Just as sensation gives us ideas about the external world, reflection gives us ideas about our internal mental landscape. From these simple ideas derived from sensation and reflection, Locke argues, the mind constructs all its complex ideas through various operations. We can combine simple ideas, the idea of a golden mountain, combines gold and mountain. Compare them, abstract from them, and manipulate them in countless ways. This is how we build up our entire conceptual apparatus, from basic perceptions to the most sophisticated philosophical and scientific theories. Simple and complex ideas, building blocks of thought. Locke dedicates considerable attention to distinguishing between different types of ideas and explaining how they relate to one another. Simple ideas are, as mentioned, the basic units that we passively receive through sensation and reflection. We can't create or destroy them through any act of will. They just arrive when we have the relevant experiences. Complex ideas, by contrast, are constructed by the mind through various operations on simple ideas. Locke identifies three main categories of complex ideas: substances, modes, and relations. Substances are our ideas of things that exist independently, like a horse, a tree, or a human being. These are collections of simple ideas that regularly occur together and that we assume belong to some underlying thing. We see brown color, a certain shape, movement, and other qualities together, and we bundle them into the concept horse. Importantly, Locke argues that we never directly perceive the substance itself, the underlying thing that supposedly holds all these qualities together. We only perceive the qualities, and we infer that there must be something supporting them. Modes are ideas that depend on substances for their existence. Mathematical and moral concepts fall into this category. The idea of a triangle or the concept of gratitude don't exist independently in the world. They're dependent ways of thinking about relationships and patterns. Relations involve comparing ideas to one another. Concepts like larger than, cause and effect, or parent and child express relationships between different ideas or things rather than representing things themselves. Primary and secondary qualities, appearance versus reality. One of Locke's most influential contributions concerns the distinction between primary and secondary qualities, a distinction that anticipates much of modern physics and philosophy of perception. Primary qualities are properties that objects genuinely possess in themselves, independent of any observer. These include solidity, extension, taking up space, shape, motion, and number. A basketball is round whether anyone looks at it or not. These qualities produce ideas in us that resemble the actual properties of objects. Secondary qualities, however, are different. Colors, sounds, tastes, smells, and temperatures don't exist in objects themselves, but rather arise from the interaction between objects and our sensory apparatus. The redness of an apple isn't a property of the apple itself, but rather a sensation produced in our minds when light of certain wavelengths bounces off the apple and strikes our eyes. If we had different sensory organs, we might perceive entirely different colors or none at all. This distinction has profound implications. It suggests that much of what we take to be the rich, colorful world of our immediate experience is actually a construction of our minds, rather than a direct representation of reality. The world in itself, stripped of our perceptual contributions, would be far different from the world we experience. A world of particles with size, shape, and motion, but no colors, sounds, or flavors. If you're finding this exploration of John Locke's groundbreaking philosophy valuable, I'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are many other philosophical summaries here that you might find equally enlightening, from ancient wisdom to modern thought. If this particular discussion has sparked your curiosity, I've included a link below where you can purchase the full text of an essay concerning human understanding and dive deeper into Locke's arguments. I've also included a link to Audible, where you can listen to complete audiobooks of philosophical classics while commuting, exercising, or relaxing. Your support helps me continue creating this content. The limits of knowledge. What can we actually know? Having established how we acquire ideas, Locke turns to a question that preoccupies much of the essay. What are the limits of human knowledge? Here, Locke reveals himself to be both ambitious and modest. Ambitious about what careful reasoning can achieve, but modest about the scope of human certainty. Locke defines knowledge as the perception of the connection and agreement, or disagreement and repugnancy, of any of our ideas. In other words, we have knowledge when we can see how our ideas relate to each other. This leads him to identify 3 degrees of knowledge, arranged by their certainty. Intuitive knowledge is immediate and certain. When we perceive that 3 is more than 2, or that a circle is not a square, we need no proof or demonstration. We see the truth directly and immediately. This is the highest form of certainty we can achieve. Demonstrative knowledge requires proof, but can still achieve certainty. Mathematical proofs exemplify this type. We can't see immediately why the angles of a triangle sum to 180 degrees, but through a series of logical steps, each of which is intuitively certain, we can demonstrate this truth conclusively. Sensitive knowledge concerns the existence of particular things outside us. When I look at my desk, I have sensitive knowledge that it exists. However, Locke acknowledges this is the least certain form of knowledge because it depends on our senses, which can potentially deceive us. Beyond these 3 degrees, Locke argues, we don't have genuine knowledge but only opinion or belief. This is a remarkably humble admission for a philosopher. Most of what we think we know about the world, Locke suggests, falls short of true certainty. We have reasonable beliefs and well-grounded opinions, but not indubitable knowledge. Language and meaning, the currency of thought. In one of the essay's most forward-looking sections, Locke turns his attention to language. He recognizes that words are essential tools for thinking and communicating, but also potential sources of confusion and error. Words, Locke argues, are arbitrary signs that stand for ideas in our minds. There's no natural connection between the sound tree and the plant it represents. Different languages use entirely different sounds for the same concept. This arbitrariness creates challenges because people often use the same words to represent different ideas, leading to misunderstanding and philosophical confusion. Locke is particularly critical of how philosophers use language. He believes much philosophical debate arises not from genuine disagreement about reality, but from confusion about words. Philosophers coin obscure terms, use familiar words in technical senses, and fail to define their terms clearly. The remedy, Locke suggests, is greater care in defining terms and ensuring that our words correspond clearly to definite ideas. This attention to language foreshadows later developments in philosophy, particularly the 20th century linguistic turn that made the analysis of language central to philosophical method. Personal identity. What makes you, you? In one of the essay's most intriguing discussions, Locke addresses the question of personal identity. What makes you the same person today that you were 10 years ago? Given that all the cells in your body have been replaced multiple times, and your ideas and beliefs have changed considerably, what constitutes your continuing identity? Locke's answer is revolutionary. Personal identity consists in continuity of consciousness, particularly memory. You are the same person as the child you once were because you remember being that child. You have consciousness extending back to those earlier experiences. This is why Locke argues that if you genuinely had no memory of something you did, it wouldn't really be you who did it in any meaningful sense. This memory-based theory of identity raises fascinating questions that Locke himself explores. What about forgotten experiences? What if memories could somehow be transferred between bodies? These thought experiments push Locke's theory in interesting directions and have influenced debates about personal identity ever since. Conclusion. Locke's enduring legacy. An essay concerning human understanding represents one of philosophy's boldest attempts to chart the possibilities and limitations of human knowledge. By grounding all knowledge in experience and carefully analyzing how the mind constructs complex ideas from simple sensory inputs, Locke established empiricism as a major force in Western philosophy. The essay's influence extends far beyond academic philosophy. Locke's ideas shaped educational theory. If the mind is a blank slate, then education becomes paramount in forming human character and capability. His work influenced political philosophy, particularly his own later writings on government, which helped inspire democratic revolutions. His emphasis on clear language and definition contributed to the development of modern science, with its insistence on operational definitions and careful observation. For contemporary readers, Locke's essay remains relevant, not despite, but because of its willingness to embrace uncertainty. In an age of information overload and competing truth claims, Locke's careful analysis of what we can and cannot know with certainty offers a model of intellectual humility combined with rigorous thinking. He reminds us to examine the foundations of our beliefs, to recognize the limits of our understanding, and to ground our ideas in experience rather than untested assumptions. The essay demonstrates that philosophy at its best is not abstract speculation disconnected from life, but a practical tool for clarifying thought and avoiding error. By understanding how our minds work and where our ideas come from, we become better thinkers, more aware of our assumptions, more careful in our reasoning, and more modest in our claims. That lesson remains as vital now as it was over 3 centuries ago. Final thoughts: knowledge, identity, and truth in modern times. Locke's empiricist philosophy resonates with unexpected urgency in our contemporary digital landscape. His insistence that all knowledge derives from experience takes on new meaning in an age where our experiences are increasingly mediated through screens, algorithms, and virtual environments. If the mind is indeed a blank slate written upon by experience, we must ask, what happens when corporations and platforms curate those experiences, deciding what information reaches our senses and shapes our understanding? The contemporary crisis of misinformation and competing realities would fascinate Locke. His warning about the confusion arising from imprecise language finds perfect expression in our current moment, where the same words mean radically different things to different communities, where freedom, justice, and even fact have become contested battlegrounds rather than shared concepts. Locke would likely advocate for what we now call media literacy, the careful examination of the sources of our ideas and the precision with which we use language to represent them. His theory of personal identity based on continuity of consciousness becomes particularly intriguing in the age of digital footprints and social media personas. We create external memories, photographs, posts, digital records that extend our consciousness beyond our biological brains. Yet we also fragment our identities across multiple platforms, presenting different versions of ourselves in different digital spaces. Would Locke recognize this distributed, digitally mediated consciousness as constituting a unified personal identity? Perhaps most relevant is Locke's fundamental humility about the limits of human knowledge. In an era of certainty and polarization, where everyone claims to possess the truth, his reminder that most of what we believe falls short of genuine knowledge offers a needed corrective. He teaches us to distinguish between what we truly know with certainty and what we merely believe or assume, a distinction our fractured discourse desperately needs. The examined mind, Locke suggests, recognizes its own limitations, and that recognition remains the beginning of wisdom.